What's going on, everybody? We are in the heart of card show season. We've got the national card show coming up. We have local card shows going on all over the place while the weather is good and travel is easy. So the question for today is, how do we prepare for and attack a card show? All right, so one of the questions I get all the time is, do I go into a card show with a hit list, with a checklist, with cards that I'm targeting, or do I just go in with an open mind? Now, my answer to that, and the thing that I want to talk about here, is it really just depends. Is this a local card show? Is this a regional card show? Is this a national card show? So I would approach each type of show differently. If you're going to a massive card show like the Dallas Card Show, like the Burbank Card Show, like the National, what you have to do is you have to be focused. There's only so much time. There's only so many hours that you can spend with your eyes finding the different cards that you want to come home with. So for a situation like this, if it's a local card show, here's what I do. I first circle the room with a loop. And what I'm looking for in that first loop are dealers I don't recognize. It's dealers that I've not seen before. And then specifically, the new dealers that have the type of cards that I'm interested in. So as a mostly vintage collector, I am making that loop looking to see, are there new faces with vintage cards? If there are, I'm going to spend a little bit of time at that table just sort of surveying the type of stuff that they have. That's my first loop. Now, then once I have made that first loop and I've kind of targeted some tables that I'm mostly interested in, I'll make a second loop. This time, instead of just a quick scan, I'm really going through the cases. I'm really looking at the individual cards of the dealers that I might be familiar with and the new dealers. At this point, I'm going to be looking to potentially make a deal, make a purchase, because if there's a card that I see that I like, it's probably a card that someone else might see and like, especially from those newer dealers that might be in from out of the area and haven't been around in the past. The dealers that I recognize a lot of the time have very similar inventory to the cards that they have brought in past shows. So a lot of the time I'm familiar with most of their inventory. So that second loop, I'm looking more strictly through the cases of the dealers that are new and returning to get a really good inventory. And I'm especially looking to buy from those dealers that are new to me. My third time through, I at that point go through, and that's when I personally start going through the value boxes. That's when I'll start digging a little bit and looking for hidden things. Now, again, I'm going to focus on the dealers that are new to me, and then I'm going to move to the dealers that I'm more familiar with, where I may have gone through their inventory before. I'm still going to go through their value boxes, even if it's a dealer whose value boxes I've been through, because there's no doubt they're always getting new inventory. They're always getting new cards. They're always bringing different things that maybe they brought in past shows. So after I've gone through the value boxes of the dealers that I'm most interested in, whether they be returning or dealers that are new to me, at that point I make another loop where I hit every table, because there are times that I'm going to miss things. There are times that some dealers that have the type of inventory I may not be that interested in have a smaller section of some other types of things that I might be interested in. So at that point, I'm making really a final loop through every single table. But for me, I don't show up with a list. I don't show up looking for specific cards. I have in my mind the types of things that I'm interested in. If I've got an extensive collection, if I'm doing a Hall of Famer run of the 1950 and 51 Bowmans, once you get into it a little bit, it may not be a bad idea to have a physical list of the cards that you have and of the ones that you're looking for. But for me, that's not generally something that I need to do, because my memory allows me most of the time to pretty much know what I have and what I don't have. But some of us are in a different sphere as to where we are in our collecting habits. So that's the way I attack a show: an open mind, not a list. First loop, I focus on those newer dealers that I'm not familiar with. Second loop, it's the familiar dealers and the newer dealers of the material that I'm interested in. Then I'm going and looking through the value boxes on my third loop, and my fourth loop is when I'm pretty much going to hit every table one last time. Now again, if it's a local show and there are different hours, that's something to consider. If you're going to be at the show for a couple of days and time's not an issue, that can affect it. But for me personally, when I'm spending, half to 2/3 of a day at a mostly local show, or most of the shows I attend, that would be my plan of attack. If I'm going to the National, if I'm going to the Burbank Card Show, it's a much different plan of attack.
Another question I commonly get is, how do you find out about the upcoming card shows? Well, I'm kind of old school, I guess, but Sports Collectors Digest. Now, this was a regular magazine/newspaper back in the day, and they still are around. And on their website, if you look up at the top, there is a show calendar. And most of the shows that are noteworthy are posted on here. So you can go ahead and fill out the information to receive the emails and stuff. But what I just do is check it fairly regularly. Again, it's listed by state here. So I go to California and I just look at what are the upcoming shows. And you can just see here all sorts of information about it. For example, the cost of a table, the hours, the cost of admission, when the show is located. And by doing this and just checking in here, it's kind of my one-stop shop for where I go. And I even calendar out shows months ahead of time, just so they're on my radar and they're on kind of my to-do list. And usually they'll go through the end of the year, and there are a lot of them on there. So the next question I get a lot is, well, what do you bring with you when you're headed to a card show?
I'm always going to bring a backpack, so I have plenty of storage space. In my backpack, I'm going to have different card protection. I'm going to have semi-rigids, I'm going to have rigids, I'm going to have a box where I can put those cards in there, because sometimes you're going to find a card that you like, but the case that the card is in is not going to be ideal. So you're going to want to be able to put those cards into a case that you're more comfortable with and into a box to hold them. In addition to that, most card shows are not in ideal locations for seeing baseball cards. The lighting often is awful, so I'm always going to bring a light. Now, this magnifying glass has a light that allows me to see a card much better, and that way, especially with raw cards, you want to make sure that you have a light. Bringing a black light is also a pretty good idea, because a black light is a good indicator for whether a card is authentic or a reproduction. So a black light's not a bad idea. Also, not long ago, Orlando from A Collector's Dream, he turned me on to this Carson Loop And what this Carson loop does is it's a heavy magnification, but it's really easy to see. You don't need a jeweler's loop where you get it right on your eye and they're kind of difficult to use. This also has a light. So I would highly recommend this. Again, this was recommended by Orlando. I'm always going to bring that with me to a show just in case the lighting is bad and I need to get a better look at a particular card. I don't pull those out that often, but I like to have them when I need them. The last thing I'm going to bring is money. The thing we have to understand is we have to put ourselves in the perspective of the dealer. For a lot of us, it's a lot safer, it's a lot more convenient to not carry cash. But as tax laws have changed, PayPal and Venmo and Zelle and some of these, there are tax implications and tax reporting implications that dealers deal with. So they're always going to give you the best deal with cash. If you want to pay with PayPal, my recommendation to you is that's for a really expensive item that you might go the PayPal route. But if you're just doing, $20, $50, $100, $200 cards, if you say, do you take PayPal? The price is probably going to be different. It's probably not going to be as good as cash. So though it's not ideal to be carrying around a large sum of cash, my suggestion is bring the amount of cash that you are comfortable carrying and carry that amount. And then if there's something that goes beyond the amount that you have on you or that you're comfortable spending cash on, at that point, maybe bring up PayPal to the dealer. But cash is king at card shows, and dealers do not want to hear you say, do you take PayPal? The deal will not be as good.
If a show is multiple days, do you attend at the start of the show or at the end?
Another common theme that comes up is, what if the show is multiple days? Do you go at the beginning or do you go at the end? For that, I would again resort to, it depends. Most of the time, I would recommend going at the beginning of the show. Now, the reason to go at the beginning of the show is because if there is new inventory that you're interested in, it's probably going to be gone by the end of the show. The deals, however, are usually best at the end of the last day because a lot of these dealers don't want to pack this stuff up. Maybe they had a good or a bad show and they're just trying to recoup some fees for their tables. They're more likely to get a little bit of extra cash and not be packing up more cards. So the deals are probably best at the end. If you go to the show at the beginning of the first day and you try to come down on price, they've got a day or two or three or four to try to sell that card. So the likelihood of them coming off their price at the beginning of day one is not going to be as good. So it kind of depends. Are you somebody who's looking for value, or are you somebody who's looking for specific stuff, and when you see it, you want to get it because you don't necessarily see it that often? That kind of would be the answer, because it really just matters about what your collecting habits are. If you are somebody who does card shows and you're looking for bulk value to put in value boxes at upcoming shows, then at the end of the show, showing up and making an offer on a lot of 50 to 100 cards, you're probably going to get the best deal toward the end of the last day. For me, I generally go on the first day and I generally get there when it opens, because that's when I'm most likely to see the types of things that I'm going to get. And when I'm just looking at picking up, a normal show for me, I might pick up 2 to 7 cards. I'm not looking for bulk stuff. I'm not looking for that killer deal at the end of the show. I'm looking at picking out the prime things that I want to add to my personal collection. So I'm a day one, pretty much right when it opens kind of guy. So as we are in the heart of card show season, those are my tips. That is what I do when approaching a card show, especially a smaller local show. When you start talking about going to the National, when you start talking about going to the Burbank Card Show or the Chantilly Card Show or the Dallas Card Show or some of these big time shows, you really do need to come up with a more focused plan, and you need to be prepared to have to walk past some tables that may not be as dialed into what you're interested in, because the amount of material in those shows is incredible. So for those local shows, these are my recommendations. This is how I approach it. These are the things that I bring. Tell me, did I miss something? Do you have a tip? Because I'm not going to pretend for a second that I have all the answers, that I have all the right answers. But that is my response to how I approach card shows, whether they're one day or multiple days, whether it's a medium-sized show or a small show. That is what I do to try to get the deals that I want and to try to come away from a local show coming out the way that I hope that things turn out. Leave a comment below. Tell me what I missed. Tell me what you do that I didn't mention. And I'd love to add that to my repertoire on how to approach a show.